So we just passed the 39th anniversary of the original IBM PC. And that came out on August 12th, 1981. Of course, that was the first time we saw any kind of DOS. And so I thought this would be an interesting time to go back through history and look at the history of DOS before FreeDOS and talk about what is DOS and where did DOS come from. So kind of start with that last question. So where did DOS come from? When IBM was looking to build the original IBM PC, they obviously knew they needed to have an operating system. And they weren't looking to build it themselves. They actually went out and talked to Gary Kildall, who had made CP/M before. And I won't go into the full history of that, but basically they weren't able to come to an agreement. And so IBM turned around and worked with Microsoft to write the operating system. Microsoft actually went to Seattle Computer and licensed their version of DOS. So Seattle Computer had made a thing called QDOS. And that stood for the Quick and Dirty Operating System. But when Seattle Computer wanted to license that, they obviously couldn't call it Quick and Dirty because nobody wants to buy that. And so they renamed it as 86DOS. And that's actually where DOS got the Disk Operating System part of its name. 86DOS stood for 86 Disk Operating System. And that's the version that Microsoft licensed. They turned right around and turned that into IBM PC DOS because they're under license to make the IBM DOS. And so that's what they did. They made PC DOS. Now, 86 DOS borrowed a lot of its designs, though, from CP/M. And CP/M, in turn, borrowed a lot of its design concepts from operating systems for the PDP-11. I want to say the PDP-8. And so if you look at the first version of CP/M, you can start to see some influences into DOS. And it will look a little strange. Let me bring up actually an emulator here that's running. This is running CP/M 1.0, CP/M 86. This version came out for the IBM PC about a year after the original IBM PC came out. Now the first two lines, the CBIOS and the booting from floppy, that actually is coming from my PC emulator, so you can ignore those. But the rest of it is coming from CP/M. Just to kind of look at what we've got here, and then we'll type in some commands. You can see it's telling you that it's CP/M 86 version 1 in 1982. The hardware that's detected, or the hardware that's able to support, is one diskette drive, and one printer, and one serial port, and 127 kilobytes of memory. And by the way, this PC emulator is actually defined as 1 megabyte of memory. So it's only able to recognize 127K of memory because that's what they expected was to be on the computer. Now, in terms of the commands, sort of some similarity to DOS. So DOS has a dir command where you can actually look at a directory, and so does CP/M. And so you're going to look at here the directory inside CP/M. You're seeing a couple of commands that look maybe a little familiar to you, or at least some that kind of feel familiar. Stat is going to show you the status of the floppy drive that I'm on right now. It's marked as read write. I have 11K of free space. That one I know is not a DOS command, but ed is the editor. And help, look at that. There's a help command back in CP/M. You can actually type help, and you can look at help in the different commands that you've got in the system. So I can, for example, look at help for the dirs command. And so this displays the names of system files. So where dir, let me just hit return out of that. And so where dir is going to give me the list of files, dirs should give me the list of system files, which don't exist on this anyway. So now you don't see a copy command because that's actually part of the pip command. I can't remember what pip stands for anymore, but pip provided the ability to copy files around. You can see also there's a copy disk to allow you to copy one floppy to another. You know, not a lot of commands on CP/M 86. So it was kind of a simple operating system. And let's now look at IBM PC DOS 1.0 and kind of compare what CP/M looked like to now what IBM PC DOS 1.0 looked like. So let's go ahead and close this, and I'll bring up my emulator for IBM PC DOS 1.0, and you can see again the first two lines are coming from my PC emulator, so just ignore those. And the first thing that PC DOS 1 is going to ask for is today's date, because original IBM PC I don't think had an internal clock, or if it did, it didn't have a backup battery, so it turned it off. It really did lose the date. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in today's date is 8/15, but we'll tell it it's 1981. And so there we go. It's IBM PC DOS, IBM Personal Computer DOS 1.0. If I do a directory, you can see I have a big list of files, and a lot of them are basic files. I don't think, do I have the wide directory listing yet here? Directory /w? No, I don't even have the /w directory. That shows up, I want to say, in DOS 2. But if I do a dir on the COM programs, and dir on the exe programs, you can see there's not a lot of external commands. So some interesting things, though, is that time and date are actually external commands here. In MS-DOS 2 or PC-DOS 2 and later versions, those are internal to command com, but here they're external commands. You've got format, which is going to put down a file system on a floppy disk, check disk to look at the disk for errors. Sys will make another floppy disk bootable. You have the ability to compare and copy floppy disks with disk comp and disk copy. Mode is that the mode of your different devices. And Edlin, of course, this is the first time you get Edlin, which is the line editor. And I've talked about Edlin in another video. Basic is it requires a firmware, so I can't actually run that here, but this is the original version of Basic, and you saw those different Basic files on my system. And so this is various sample programs that you could use to learn about Basic and kind of see what it would do. Let's look at we'll do type on bug.base. And you can see this is a very short sample here. This is going to play La Cucaracha, Mexican folk song. So, you get some sample programs here. So again, there's not a lot of, not a lot of commands in DOS 1.0. There's just not a lot of them there, because we just need to get something out the door, and we need to be able to run the IBM PC. They don't even have, by the way, the ability to make directories. You can't even make directories in this. So if I do make dir, say temp, to create a temp directory, that doesn't exist. DOS 1.0 did not support subdirectories. Everything was running from a floppy disk, and why would you put directories on a floppy disk? There's just not enough space there. So the DOS 1.0 did not have the ability to create directories. With that, they actually added directories in DOS 2.0. So let's go ahead and close this emulator, and we'll bring up PC DOS 2.0. So again, the first thing it's going to do is prompt me for the date, and so here it thinks it's January 1st, 1980. So we'll go ahead and hit return on that to say, yeah, fine, it's 1980, and it's picked up my local system time. And again, here we are with PC DOS 2.0. If I do a directory, you can see they've added some new commands. Actually, I think this is the first version we can do a wide listing. Yeah, so and just to kind of point out a couple of things, just like CP/M had 8.3 file names. That means files were 8 characters for the base part of the file name. Then there's a dot, and then you had a 3-letter extension. So that's what 8.3 means. And so just like CP/M, DOS has been carrying forward that 8.3 concept. Here in DOS 2.0, we've added some new commands. We've added backup and restore, so you can now back up the files on your system. We have the ability to support hard drives at this point, so you can actually back up your hard drive onto, I think, floppies. And we have the ability to clear the screen. That's the first time we can clear the screen, is PC DOS 2.0. Oops, I got to that wide directory. You've got other commands that are new here. You can now sort files with the sort command. You can look for text inside files using the find command. Because we can create directories, so we can do make directory on, let's say, temp, we can actually run things like tree to see things that are inside my directory tree. Now, there's nothing inside the temp directory, so it's not really going to show anything there, but that's showing you what's inside the temp directory. Let's go inside temp directory. And let's make another one. Let's call it temp2. And now let's go back to the main directory and we'll do tree. And you can see this is the output that we're getting on tree. It's just showing you the different directories that are out there. On the main directory, we've got a thing called temp, and inside temp, you can see subdirectories are temp2. And then once it goes inside temp2, you can see the subdirectories. There's no subdirectories inside there, so then it ends. And so that's what you're getting with PC DOS 2, that wide directory. Some other things showing up in DOS 2, you're getting a break command, you're getting a CTTY. You have the ability now to echo. Actually, that's a new command as well. You can echo hello world. You can print things like that, because batch commands, while batch commands were supported in PC DOS 1, now there's better support for batch commands in PC DOS 2. You can now for the first time do a for command. You can do an if command. You can do a goto within a batch file. Those are the new features that are inside PC DOS 2. You also have, as you can see here in the screen, you've got a more command, so you can look at files one screen at a time. And because, by the way, we have the ability to create directories, we also have to have the path command inside command-com. And some other options in here as well, but those are kind of the main neat features that you're seeing in PC DOS 2. Now, PC DOS 2 came out in 1983, so it was about 2 years or so after the original IBM PC came out. And then about a year or so after that is when PC DOS 3 came out. So let's stop this and we'll bring up PC DOS 3. So here's PC DOS 3. Again, the first two lines are coming from a PC emulator. So really we're seeing the current date. It's going to detect actually the correct date. And I'm just going to hit return for that and my local system time. And so this is PC DOS 3. Not a ton of new features in PC DOS 3, but there are some neat things in here to point out. So if I do a directory, let's do a Y directory. This is the first time you have the ability to support other keyboard languages. And so normally we do that with the keep command. But actually here, do a keep star, there are different specific commands to support the different keyboard languages. So for example, the French keyboard's on the bottom, UK, I think that's German and Italian, and then I think Spanish is the one at the top. And so in later versions, keep was sort of a master command, and that had the ability to load specific files. And so that's how they were done in later versions. But here in this version of PC DOS 3, you had specific commands for the different keyboard languages. We also have some new features in here. You can see graphics is in there. There's also a graphics table command. And so we are starting to see some new features. What's happening, by the way, this elsewhere in PC during this time. So this came out in 1984. What else happened in 1984? Apple released the original Apple Macintosh computer, which was the first computer that really had a graphical user interface. Certainly the first personal computer to have a real graphical user interface by default. And a year after that, Microsoft came out with Windows 1.0, which I won't cover in this video series, but I'll just mention 1.0 was kind of vaporware. It didn't really do a lot. Windows 2, which came out a couple years later, fixed a lot of the bugs, but it wasn't great. And it wasn't until Windows 3 came out in 1990 that things really got better, but it still, in my opinion, was never really good. So this is what we got here in PC DOS 3. Now, after PC DOS 3, Microsoft was allowed to start selling DOS on its own. It had been able to do some OEM stuff here and there, but you can actually buy versions of MS-DOS after this. Let's go ahead and close this emulator. And I'm going to bring up, this should be MS-DOS 3.3. So again, it's going to prompt me for the date. And so now we have MS-DOS 3.3. So we're getting a couple of other features in DOS 3.3. do a directory on this one. So you're getting a couple of new things. You've got the ability to do call inside a batch file, to call another batch file from within one. But not a ton of other stuff. Although I think even Xcopy wasn't on this one yet. Xcopy was coming up pretty soon, but it looks like not here yet. But this was the first version of MS-DOS I ever used, and this one came in sort of a gray, sort of a putty gray sort of manual, and as all the computers were at the time. So not a lot of new stuff really to point out, at least that I'm going to point out in MS-DOS 3. MS-DOS 4, that was more interesting. Let's go ahead and close this, and we'll bring up MS-DOS 4. So MS-DOS 4 was the first version that had what was called the DOS shell. And so this was an optional thing when you installed MS-DOS. You could opt to install the DOS shell. And when I did this install, I chose to install the DOS shell. You're looking at the DOS shell right here. It's kind of a text mode way of looking at what's on your system. And you can do F10 here. That's the actions. That'll bring up the menu. You can see here program. I can start a program and add and change and delete some things inside here. I can make groups. I actually don't remember all the stuff that's in here, but I think you can create groups of things, and you can go into it. So let's go ahead and create a group on something to kind of remind ourselves what this is. And so let's create one called games. What file do I add for that? So I'm just going to hit return on here and see what's in here. Help desk, help text, let's say list of games. And I don't need to password protect this. So let's go ahead and just hit F2 now to save. Oh, and it really wants a file name. So let's call it games. We'll call it games. And hit F2 then. Oh yeah, and there's my games file down here, my games group, which is empty. So I can actually add stuff to that by hitting F10. And do I go under group? No, that's only grouping. So we're going, and I can add an entry in here. And so, what things do we have in here? There was a game I remember playing called Sopwith. I think it was I think he called it Sop. This is not coming with MS-DOS, so just don't remember what was in there. It was a simple sort of 2D flight game. And hit F2 to save that. Now, if I hit return on that, nothing's going to happen because it won't be able to find the SOP command, so it's going to just exit right away. But that's how you would use the DOS shell in this version. Go into the menus again, and let's go into the exit so we can actually exit the shell. And let's do a directory to see what else we have on here. So you can see a lot of stuff being added in DOS 4.0. We'll do it for remind ourselves what version this is. This is DOS 4.01. DOS 4.00 was actually a buggy release, and so 4.01 came out shortly thereafter. So when most people talk about DOS 4, they're probably talking about 4.01. And so you can see that DOS shell was a pretty new thing. You also have the ability to run the mem command. And you can see that's the memory they have in my system. The shell was a pretty big deal. There's GW Basic, by the way, so we can run GW Basic. If you want to run stuff like 10 print hello, go ahead and run that with an F2. It's hello, and now let's make it an infinite loop by saying 20, go to 10. Let's go ahead and list that. So we'll do F1 list, and let's go ahead and run that with F2. I'll hit Control C. That's going to just run forever. Hey, I may have actually screwed myself up by doing that. That's not a good idea. Wow, I've completely messed myself up. So anyway, that's an infinite loop with in a basic program. Let's go ahead and stop this, and we'll bring up the next version of MS-DOS, and that was MS-DOS 5. MS-DOS 5 for me was that was the first time I was really impressed with stuff that MS-DOS could do. I don't recall using the DOS shell under DOS 4. As you saw, it was kind of primitive. DOS 5 DOS shell was much more interesting. You can see here it's giving you a file manager as well as groups down there at the bottom. And so you can do tab to switch between these different window panes, and so I can go under DOS. You can see now tab over here, and I can go down here in this list, and everything that's inside the DOS command or the DOS directory. So you're getting a lot of neat features here in DOS. Oh yeah, and Gorilla Base. So we'll talk about that in a second. But this is the first time that MS-DOS included QBasic. So they replaced GW Basic, which was actually in MS-DOS 1 or 1.1. Again, it was an OEM version, and that went all the way up through MS-DOS 4. And then in MS-DOS 5, they replaced that basic environment with the much better QBasic environment. It was an interpreted-only version of the Quick Basic, which was a compiled version of Basic. So you can see the other stuff that's inside this this directory, but you know that QBasic really was a huge deal. There's also a help version up here. You can see help, and that was kind of built onto using the QBasic system as well. Also, this is the first time that Edlin has now been replaced. Let's go back up here. Edlin, I think, still exists as a backup. Yeah, so Edlin is still there, but we have the new edit command. So edit is actually calling the QBasic. You can see it's a very small file. It's actually calling the QBasic environment in edit mode. We also have in DOS 5 features like EMM386, and so that's going to let you support more memory on a 386 or higher system. Let's get out. Call that requires money is another sample basic program. I don't recall there's a lot of other Nibbles is sort of the snake game. I don't recall there's a lot of other new features. Print, I see print is in here, and I think print might have been new in MS-DOS 5. I don't have a specific memory in that. No, I take that back. Print actually did exist in earlier versions of DOS, but I think this is the first time it added some sort of a queuing system, so you could actually support printing things more than once, or sort of more than one file at a time, which is really handy if you're trying to do other things. Normally, you could print, and then that was all you could do. There's undelete and unformat, and those were programs that were licensed from Central Point Software. Those weren't actually Microsoft programs; they were just licensed from a third party. Those required another program called Mirror. If I go back up here, a program called Mirror. There it is. And that would, if I recall correctly, that would create some sort of a state file of your system, so it could be used in undelete later on. Hit tab. You can see down here other things in the what's basically the menu system. So I can do hit return on disk utilities. You can see different things I have under disk utilities. Go back up to the main group. So it's kind of a neat little menu system. It's also supported a graphics mode. Let's see if I can bring that up. Was it under options or was it under view? I guess it's going to be under options. So we'll go under options for display. Yeah, you can bring it up in a graphics mode. And so let's bring it up in graphics 25. So it's the same resolution, or at least number of lines that we're seeing in this text mode, which is an 80 by 25, but we're going to see this in a graphics mode. So we get to see icons and everything. So that's a much better way of looking at it. And I seem to recall that I used it in the 34 lines is what I remember in, which looks to me a little better. This is the best that I remember getting. If you go much higher than that, the icons and the text just becomes a little small. But just to kind of show you what else is in there, you go up to 60 lines, which I don't recall enjoying very much. Let's see if we can support it on this system. Yeah, it's really, really small. So I wasn't a big fan of that. Let's bring it back to the 34 lines. You can see also the colors, and so you could choose different colors. Ocean was the one I kind of liked. the best. It was also the default. You can go basic blue, which looks, by the way, if you remember what Windows looked like, this is kind of the colors you had in Windows. DOS 5, by the way, was concurrent with Windows 3. Windows 3 came out in like the year before. This came out, MS-DOS 5 came out in 91, and DOS 3 came out in 1990. So yeah, it's looking, this color scheme is looking a little Windows-like, so let's go ahead and change to a different color. Oh yeah, hot pink and turquoise and emerald city. So let's go ahead and let's look at turquoise. And so that's not too bad. Go under options again and choose colors, and you can see emerald city is kind of all green, and then hot pink, go into hot pink, sort of all bubblegum and purple. So that's the that was the DOS shell. I use this one quite a bit. I also recall there was a sort of a task swapping feature, which you could do through Alt Tab, but I'm not going to do that here because my local system is going to try and intercept the Alt Tab. So let's go ahead and exit out of the environment here, and we'll go into QBasic real quick. Let's go into look at our basic programs. And you can see here the different basic programs that came with DOS 5. These were meant to be things you could start from to learn from, but they're also kind of fun as well. Let's go into Gorilla. So we'll do QBasic, and then /run to run a command, and then gorilla.base. You can see right there is bringing me into Gorillas. We'll go ahead and go with one player on this one. And let's go and start at 1 point. And gravity is 9.8. And let's go ahead and play the game. And that's our basic game here for gorillas. Let's just do 0-0 because I think that'll allow me to just drop a exploding banana and kill myself. And that looks like it is. There we go. There's my banana. And that's just gonna, I guess, hover there for a while. And let's see if I can exit out of this. Wow, I kind of messed myself up here. I need that banana to really fall down to the ground. There we go. I've killed myself. So that's gorillas .base. Now let's exit out of this and let's go into DOS 6. DOS 6 actually had a couple different versions. There was a DOS 6, there's a 6.2 that I remember being important, and a 6.2.2. There was no 6.1. There was actually a PC DOS 6.1, and MS-DOS didn't call it 6.1 because they didn't want to confuse the two. So we just had a MS-DOS 6, 6.2, and 6.2.2. So let's go ahead. This is running really, really slowly because, again, it's interpreted inside an emulator. So it's taken a while there. So let's go ahead and just close this MS-DOS 5, and we'll restart into MS-DOS 6. It's not bringing ourselves up into a DOS shell environment by default. So we're just starting at the regular command line. We'll do a directory wide. And by the way, I should have mentioned in DOS 5, you had a whole bunch of commands that you could now do with a question mark as an option. That allows you to bring up a pretty useful help screen to remind you what the different things were that you could do in those commands. And so with dir, you could do things like dir order. And then you could group directories first, you could do by name, and you could do then by extension. And so that's actually how I typically would do my directories. If I just did a dir without that, you can see that I'm getting a different order of my name. But I would typically do a dir OGNE, and you can actually do a set dir command, dir CMD, as OGNE, and by default now, anytime you do dir is going to use that. And that was the first time that showed up was also DOS 5. If I go into the DOS directory, I get quite a number of things in here because DOS 6 added a lot of different things. And just doing a directory wide, you can see I have quite a lot of things in here. Now, one of the things that was new in DOS 6, and it kind of feels like maybe it should have shown up earlier, but it really was DOS 6. First time you get the choice command. So the option to in batch files, very, very helpful to say yes, no to something. So look at the options for choice. So you need to give it a prompt, and you can also give it a timeout, things like that. So you can say choice, do you want to reboot? And they would give you the prompt to say yes or no. And so that was a helpful little command for batch programming. And this is also the first time you had a move command. Let's do a wide here. You can see move should be in there, or was move a built-in command? No, there it is. Dir move .exe. And so move was in there for the first time. That allowed you to move one or more files across different parts of the file system. You also had CD support with MSCDX. You had a diagnostics programs with MSD. And that was a handy program to see what was on your system. I think this is probably mostly used when you needed to get help. If something was wrong with your system, you need to call somebody. They'd ask you to run MSD. That's the Microsoft Diagnostics program. Let's go ahead and I can do Alt for the menu. And what are the things we can do here? We can look at the different files themselves. You can see, Microsoft really expected you to run Windows on top of this. And so by default, they're going to include some Windows files, which Windows is not installed on here. So I don't think anything's going to show up if I hit return on that. Yeah, nothing's going to show up on that. So, this came out at the end of Windows 3.1, and then later in 1993, DOS 6 came out in 93. Later in 93 was Windows 3.11, which was Windows for Workgroups. That was a pretty stable and pretty common version of Windows. That came out with 6.2, DOS 6.2, and then later you had DOS 6.22, which removed some things from DOS 6.2. You can see here the memory block display. You can see all the things that are living inside my memory. So MSD did quite a lot of neat things. The memory browser, you can see what's inside the memory. And so, a lot of neat, let's do F3 to exit out of that. So a lot of neat things inside MS-DOS 6. And so again, we're running 6.0 in this case. This is the first time that ScanDisk was there, although I think that was a 6.2 thing. Yeah, ScanDisk wasn't in 6.0. That was 6.2. But you do have some neat, quite a lot of new commands and new features inside the DOS directory. Mouse, you can see mouse is there, but I think mouse was in DOS since say DOS 4, but my notes here say actually it was actually DOS 5. So you are seeing some features showing up now. The directory here is getting a lot bigger. We got 133 files. If I look at just the exe commands, I got 46 of those, and the com commands, 19 of those. And so, I've got not a ton of external commands. The rest of them are other types of files, usually support files or DLLs, things like that, and or CPI. And so, DOS itself doesn't have a lot of commands like you'd find on, for example, a Unix system. But again, what was the purpose of DOS? That DOS was really about letting you launch the next application. Before I go, I did want to show that help system. And so here's the new help system that's in MS-DOS. This was a version that was MS-DOS 5 didn't have this interactive help system. That brought up more of a text file. MS-DOS 6 was really what added this this navigatable sort of hot link system. And so if I wanted to get more information about the for command, just need to bring my cursor over to for and hit return, and now I can get more detail on the for command. And I can just scroll through and read more about the for command. And so this was kind of a neat thing. You can see notes and syntax and then examples. So it's really neat feature here. But again, nothing was really architected. So back to that, what is DOS? DOS was really meant to let you run applications, and there were a lot of great applications for DOS. It was giving it out of here. A lot of great applications for DOS, a lot of great games for DOS, and DOS was really there to let you launch the next game or the next application. DOS by itself was not meant to be, let's say, a Unix replacement. You're not going to see in MS-DOS or PC-DOS any kind of equity with or parity with what's going on inside Unix, because it was meant to be a different type of operating system. It was really here to let you run the next application. I think with that, I'll go ahead and close out. Before I go, let me just thank everyone who's supporting me on Patreon. You really do make this channel happen. So thank you very much for your support. That means the world to me. And some of you are supporting me at a higher level, and I really appreciate your help there. So thank you very much, those of you who are supporting me at that higher level on Patreon. Before I go, visit our website at freedos.org. Join us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you.